Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this Devtoberfest session on TypeScript and CAP. Before I begin, I should introduce myself. My name is Mike Doyle, and I'm an independent developer based down in Sydney, Australia. I grew up in the UK and I started work as an ABAP consultant in 2000. Quite soon, I started working with some other technologies like Enterprise Portal and WebDimpro. And I first started with BTP in 2016, when, of course, it wasn't called BTP, it was called HANA Cloud Platform. Since 2018, I've been doing lots of CAP work, and I really enjoy working with CAP, hence the session today. I moved from London down to Sydney in 2015, and I've got two daughters who are 11 and 14, and two poodles who are 4 years old. Okay, let's get down to things. So, what is this TypeScript? What's it all about? Uh, Very basically, TypeScript is JavaScript plus types. In other words, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, and types are the difference between the two. And you can see in this diagram, it's nice and simple. You can see that TypeScript is a superset. It's more than JavaScript, and the difference between the two is just the types. That's all it is. So we should talk a little bit. Why do we care about the types? Well, we want to reduce the runtime errors that we get by finding issues at design time when we're writing the code. Now, statically typed languages like ABAP and Java show us type errors as we write our code, so we can correct them straight away before we try and run anything. I'm sure many of you are familiar with ABAP and Java. Now, JavaScript is much more flexible and expressive, and that's one of the reasons I really like using it. And JavaScript is a bit different. It has dynamic typing, which means that our variables don't have a type at the beginning, but once their value is assigned to our variables, they take up a type. It's inferred by the value that the variable is holding. So that's a different system, and one of the downsides is that it means that it's easier for us to deploy code that has runtime errors in it because we're doing something incorrect with our types, for example. So what if we could get all the benefits of type safety, like we have in ABAP, for example, without tying JavaScript down and losing that flexibility that we love? Well, the good news is that there is a solution, and it's TypeScript. And TypeScript is a industry standard language. It's an industry standard solution that many other people outside the SAP world have been using for some time. And it's becoming more and more supported and understood within the SAP world as well. Now, to kind of bring home why we want to use TypeScript. Recently, I had quite a big CAP application that I was refactoring. I was moving things around. I was changing how the code was broken down, and I spent quite a few hours doing this. And as I went, if I ever renamed a function and forgot to rename one of the places it was called, straight away, because I was using TypeScript, I saw all the errors. And at the end of my refactoring, I deployed my code and tested it, and I found very few errors because I'd found most of them just when I was finishing off editing the code. So that really brought it home to me how fantastic TypeScript is and how it really helps us as developers. Now, some of you may be wondering, how do we run this TypeScript code? Because, of course, browsers don't have TypeScript runtimes. They have JavaScript runtimes. And CAP does have two different runtimes, but it's JavaScript and Java, not TypeScript. And there's never going to be a TypeScript runtime for CAP. At least we don't expect so. Now, the answer is that when we build our code, we do what's called a transpile. We transpile the TypeScript to JavaScript, and that's what gets put into the deployable and deployed. So it's a bit like, many of you be familiar with when we minify front-end JavaScript. So we're building a UI, and in order to make the files smaller and quicker to download, we transform the JavaScript and we do things like reduce the white space and reduce the size of variable names so that we really compress down the file size. And so what we do with TypeScript is very, very similar. We do the transpilation and we have JavaScript source, which then gets deployed and run. And the TypeScript, it's best to think of it really as being a design time thing. It's not a runtime thing, it's a design time thing. Now, there are a couple of things to note. When we run our CAP application locally, it can actually run from the TypeScript sources, and I'll show you that in the demo, which we'll get to shortly. And more generally, when we debug, we can actually step through the TypeScript source even when the application's being deployed, because we can add or we can automatically add a kind of map which shows the browser, for example, if it's front-end code, how to step through the TypeScript. And before we go on, I should also say that we can actually get some of the benefits of TypeScript just through using linting in our IDE. But I prefer to use TypeScript because it's an industry standard and the checking that it can do for us is really comprehensive. So that's what I'd like to show you today. Now, this is our demo scenario. We're using the gateway demo system that SAP provide called ES5. So it's just out there publicly available with a few OData services that you can use if you just sign up and get an account. And we're going to use a service which is called the GW Sample Basic service. It's an OData v2 service. This is designed for you to play around with, and we're going to play around with it today. So a couple of the entities we're interested in were mainly the sales order entity. From the sales order entity, we can jump to the business partner for that sales order, and then each business partner has a number of contacts. So these are the entities that service exposes. Now, our task for today is to transform that data so we actually have one single entity, as you can see on the right-hand side, which has all of that data combined into a single entity. So it has some information from the sales order, some from the business partner, and some from the first contact that comes up. So that's what we're going to do in our demo today. And if you're a little bit old-fashioned, you might say we're denormalizing the data. So we're taking it from its original form there and putting it together. So let's have a look at the demo. Okay. So we jump to Business Application Studio. Now, hope many of you or all of you are familiar with Business Application Studio. I'm not going to give an introduction to BAS or to CAP, but today I'm going to show you how TypeScript can help us with our CAP. So the first file we've got, if we just explore our application here, our code is partially complete. You can see we have a schema here, which is describing our data. And you can see that we're taking in the models from that service that's provided on ES5, this GW sample basic service. So you can see that we're referencing the sales order, business partner, and contact sets. And down here, we're just exposing them in the same form. So the sales order, we're taking all the fields, and the business partners and contacts, we're just listing a subset of the fields that we want to use. Now, up above, you can see here's our combined entity. So I've just listed all the properties that I want here. And you'll see we have a couple of annotations. The first is the persistent skip, which is basically telling us that, or telling CAP that this data isn't going to be persisted in HANA. So what's happening today is we're putting our CAP application in between our imaginary UI and this other service, which is out in the cloud essentially. So we're acting almost as a proxy. So there's no need for a HANA database to persist. The data's just persisted in ES5. So that's what the persistent skip means. And this singular annotation, we'll come back to this, but basically what we're doing is we're describing what one instance of this entity set should be called. So many of them are called sales orders, and we're describing that in the singular, they should be known as a sales order, or in this case, an extended sales order, because we have the additional fields. So now if we look, we should have a service already defined. We can see it's called the demo service. When we open this up, you can see again, we're referencing those entities from the schema, and our service is just exposing those 4 entity sets. There's the 3 that are just passed through from the backend service, and this one is our extended one where we combine the data. So that's our service, and we'll just have a little look in the package JSON, because with CAP, that's obviously always important. We can see that we've got the service defined here, and we list the destination name on BTP, which is pointing to ES5, and we can see the path through to the service itself. And we can also see I've added a couple of scripts here just to make things a bit quicker today, limit the typing. So you can see hybrid JS. That means we're going to start the application in hybrid mode. What that means is we're going to run the application locally, but we're going to access the services that are running on BTP. We're not going to mock the data. Even when we run locally, we're actually going to be calling ES5. And we're using the CDS bind command, which you can look up in the CAP documentation. But basically, that's allowing us to bind to those deployed services. An example is the destination service, so we can read our destination. Now, you can probably guess that the hybrid TS is for TypeScript, JS for JavaScript, and TS for TypeScript. So what that does is it's basically going to run TypeScript source instead of JavaScript source. And so those are just little scripts which mean we can start the app with a little bit less typing. No pun intended. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're just going to run the app. So we'll run this hybrid.js script, and we'll see what we get. Before we do that, actually, we should just look at the implementation. Yeah, and you can see that we have this handler here. This is for those 3 entity sets that we're just exposing, passing straight through. We're using what's called service consumption in CAP to publish the entity and then just pass on the requests, as you'll see in a moment. So for the sales orders, the business partners, and the contacts, when we have a query come in, we're just passing it on to this gateway sample service. And that's all we're doing, hence only 2 lines of code required. And then we can see we do have a handler for the sales orders extended entity. This is the one that where we're transforming the data. This is our new one. And at the moment, we don't have any code in there. That's what we're going to have to complete today. So now if we start up, so we go hybrid JS, because you'll see we've still got a .js implementation. This is just regular JavaScript. Then our app will start up. Okay, that was quick. And now we can open the app and we can just open all of these entity sets. Here we go. All right. Now, these are the sales orders. So you can see we've got all the fields here. We didn't specify which ones we wanted. So we have customer details and the amounts of the sales order and the delivery status. We have the business partners and we have the, I closed the context. Let's open that again. Here are the contacts. So there could be one or more for each business partner. And then you'll see for the sales order extended, we had the implementation, but it's empty. So surprise, surprise, we don't actually get any data. Now, there's one more thing we can do. So I can just show you how the service consumption or demonstrate the service consumption is working. We can actually apply a filter on the sales order. So we're going to filter where the delivery status isn't equal to D for delivered, and also order by the customer name. So now you can see African Gold and Diamond Corporation jumps to the top because it begins with A, and all the delivery statuses are blank. They don't show status delivered. So without just the 2 lines of code, we're basically exposing completely functional entity set. All right, that's great. So that's our start point. We might just stop our server because we're going to make some changes. Now, the first thing we need to do is to actually use the handy tool to add the TypeScript files. So we're going to do cds add TypeScript. There we go. That's all we need to do. Now, if we go back to the package JSON, you can see that we've had some dependencies added for TypeScript or the types that come with Node. So they reference the Node signatures. And we have this thing called CDS typer. What's that? Well, CDS typer is all about allowing us to very easily access types that we've created as part of our CAP application, what we're actually doing in our schema. So if we go over back to our schema, for example, now this is our entity set where we're going to combine the data. And if I just add a new field here, called test, which is a string, you will see, you won't yet. We need to do one thing, which is actually install. That was the deliberate mistake. We need to install the packages that we just added. So now once we add the field, we can see there, you see the message CDS type generation successful. And we can look in here, this new folder called CDS models. And now we have models for the service that we're using, the one that we imported. And we also have types for our demo service that we created. And if we look in the index, we can see here's this sales order type for our new entity. And you can see it even has a test2 property that I added. So now if we want to use TypeScript, we can reference these types. They match exactly the entities that we've declared in our CAP application. So let's go back to the schema. I don't think we'll keep our test2 property. And now what we can do is change our implementation and switch to TypeScript. And the reason is that when we're implementing this solution to combine the entity sets, it's going to be a lot easier if we're using TypeScript rather than JavaScript. And I think we're much less likely to make mistakes that lead to runtime errors. So what we're going to do is we'll go down where we have our demo service here. We're actually going to rename that, and we're going to call it .ts for TypeScript instead of .js for JavaScript. We can just rename the file, and we'll just open it up. And you'll see we just get a couple of errors here. This is because TypeScript doesn't know what this reference is, what type it has, and it would like us to add a type so that it can check what we're doing. And we can do this quite easily if we just add these references here. We'll just uncomment these. There we go. And now if we just, what we can do is we can just show that this is actually a request object, which comes from the types that CAP provides. And you can see now this import is being used. And we can do the same here. So this colon type name syntax you'll see regularly. That's how we indicate the type of a particular variable. And you can also, you'll also see we have it in functions to indicate what the return signature is. And we can also change this now, this reference to in the service signature. So now we have valid TypeScript already. That's all we need to do to switch over. But you can see that our implementation here is still empty. So we're not doing anything. What we need to do is go and take this commented code here, and we'll see if we can use this. But I've got a feeling there may be some errors in here that we need to find before we have a working solution. So if I just copy this in here, and then we will uncomment it, we'll see how we're going. Now, first of all, we can see we've got an error here. This is because our function name is incorrect. It's not actually called get sales orders. It's called get orders. So now our errors go away. And you can see there was an error down here, which has also gone away. And the reason is because this function has a type that it returns. Let's go and have a look at get orders. Here you see this colon type idea again, and it's a promise because it's an async function. I don't want to go into that now, but you can see that it's returning the sales order set. So what this function is doing is it's going and getting those orders from that entity from the existing service. So you can see here we've got this select here from the sales orders table. So because this function tells us that it's returning a array of sales orders, when we go up here now and we loop through that entity set, we know the type of this order. So that's all good. So we just get a unique set of the business partner IDs. Then we go and read the business partners. We read the contacts for those business partners, and then we're going to join them all together. So we can see it looks like we've got another typo here. This should be extended sales order there. Now this is a valid type. And so now all of these fields here can be validated because we we have our extended sales order type that a typer created for us. So we can see here's we know the types of these orders and partners and contacts as well. We can see we've got another typo here, and we've got an error here. This is because this is a number type on the net amount. And here we're trying to prefix a $sign. So that's not going to work. So if we take that out, then that error goes away. And this is misnamed. There's a typo. It's not sales order no, it's sales order number. So we can find all these errors here. There isn't a property called gross, it's called gross amount. And we can find all these errors now at design time. It's not phone no, it's phone number. There we go. So this is how we're combining our fields together. And in the case of the contact name, for example, we're joining the first name and the last name together. So we're doing a bit of a transformation. Okay, so now we should be all ready to go. We should have resolved all of our errors. So now all that remains is to start up, but this time we will use the script to actually run the TypeScript source rather than the JavaScript source. Okay, so now it's starting up. Just give another second. There we go. And if we go back to our extend entity set, it used to be empty because we didn't have an implementation. Now when we run it, we get our new data set. So we've got a combination of the sales order fields, the business partner fields, and the contact fields. So our TypeScript has really helped us to get the job done and not have any runtime errors. So now if we just return very briefly to the slides, I just want to introduce the documentation. So this is the standard TypeScript site. As I said, it's an industry standard. There's heaps of documentation here to explain how to do everything. Obviously, today I haven't told you how to use TypeScript. I've just introduced it at a very high level. There's also, of course, the CAP documentation, which has a special page all about TypeScript and all of the features that have been added quite recently. And so TypeScript's getting better and better support from the CAP team themselves. You might like to check out my blog, which is a general overview of TypeScript, not just in CAP, but also around UI5 and other parts of the SAP world. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming along today and attending this talk. I hope the TypeScript curious amongst you might give TypeScript a go now with your CAP, and you'll find once you give it a go, you'll probably never go back to plain old JavaScript again. Thank you very much. See you.